Okay. Let's take it. Okay. Before we start Genesis 11, in chapter 10, if you notice, in verse 8 and 9, and 10, Cush had a son named Nimrod, and he was a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, which is in the land of Shinar. And now the earth is one language, one speech, one people, and Nimrod is the leader. Now Nimrod was of Cush, and if you look up Cush, it is a people which also a land was in Africa. And so basically the first world leader was a black man. But they was one language, and they wanted to make a name for themselves, so they tried to build a tower to heaven. And so they would have a monument to remember that they was one language, one speech. They wanted to do that in case, the Lord scattered them off abroad the face of the earth. Which he did, because he seen them, and he said, they're one people, one language, and nothing's restrained from them from what they've imagined to do. So he confound them and scattered them abroad the face of the earth. And I believe that that's when the people's skin changed, their features, body types, I guess, to fit the climates of the land and territories which they were at and lived in. But it makes me wonder why God didn't want people to be one accord and to have one language, which it will be like that again. We will have one language, I believe, when the real leader, the Prince of Peace, will be our leader. But for some reason, he didn't want them to do that right now. So then, so they're scattered upon the face of the earth. Then it goes on down to the descendants of Shem and leads to Terah, which had Abram, Nahor, Haran. And they was traveling. They stayed in the land of Haran, and Abram had a wife, Sarah, and Terah died. So they was Abram's father died, and they stayed in the land of Haran. But God called Abram and wanted him to get away from his country and away from his kindred into a land that they'll show him. So it's like sometimes when God wants to use us and for us to be useful for Him, not all of us, but for some people, they're not meant to be in the place they were born and around their family. God has purposes for different people in different ways. But for Abram, his was to leave his family, for God was going to take him to the land that's going to be his inheritance. So he left at 75 years old. He took his nephew, Lot, and all that they had, and they was going to travel to the land of Canaan. But there was a famine in the land, and so grievous, so they went to the land of Egypt to, survive the famine. Now, when they was going to Egypt, Abram told his wife to pretend like she was his sister, because she was a good-looking woman, and if the Egyptians saw her, they'd basically kill him and take her. And you think about that, that's wild. I mean, just if we was living like that today, and I try to take my wife out, and people look, well, hey, I want to take her, and cut my throat and take her. I mean, people was rough back then, which people are rough now, but I couldn't imagine that. So the Pharaoh saw her, and he thought she looked good, so he took her. But he, gave Abram gifts, gave him cattle, sheep, servants, everything to take her. And then the Lord plagued Pharaoh's house with a great plague, and he found out that she was Abram's wife rather than his sister. So, he asked him, why'd you lie to us, and why'd you do this to us for? And he told him that, well, if I'd have told you she was my sister, or she was my wife, you'd probably kill me to take her. So he sends them away with gifts, and they go back up towards Canaan and stuff. And but then there was so many of them now that they started bumping heads, people fussing with each other and arguing. There just wasn't enough room for them all to go as one accord. So Abram told him, let's not fuss about all this. Let's just, pick one way to go, and I'll pick the other. I mean, so Lot went towards Sodom. He looked at the plains. It looked beautiful, well watered and stuff. I mean, just nice, tropical paradise. That's the Middle East now. I mean, so what could have happened through the years to make the Middle East not be a tropical paradise? It's all deserts now and barren land. He looked up and the plains, and he beheld all the plains of Jordan, and it was watered well, or well watered everywhere. Before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. So you think about that now. Egypt today is a desert, but back then it was just like paradise. Tall green grass, tropical trees and fruits, water. So Lot was going towards Sodom, and Abram went a different way. But it said the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And we'll get on into that when we get to it, but there was some rough dudes in Sodom. And God told Abram, after they separated, he said, to look in all the directions. This is the land I'm going to give you and the seed after you. I'm going to make you a nation, basically, and they'll be like the dust of the earth that no man can number them. So Abram built an altar unto the Lord there. And then it came to pass, Lot was in Sodom, and the king Amraphel of Shinar, him and a bunch of other kings, was going after Sodom, because I guess they had a treaty, and Sodom served them for 12 years, and then the 13th year, Sodom and Gomorrah rebelled from them. So now it's the 14th year, and they're going after them because they rebelled against them. So they went down there, all the kingdoms did, and went to war with Sodom and Gomorrah and overtook them. That the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled to the mountains to hide from them. They took all the goods of the land, all the women, the children. They took hostages. But Abram heard that they took Lot as a hostage, as a captive. Yeah, not really hostages, but yeah, captives, prisoners of war, basically. So he heard that he took Lot. So he gathered together and divided themselves and went after them at night time and overtook them with his men. Now you think about that. That's a bunch of kingdoms going after, 2 countries at one time, and then Abram and his couple of guys or whatever overtook them. So he overtook them and then returned the people back to their lands. All their goods that was taken, and all that went back. He basically returned everything. And then the king of Salem brought bread, and he was a priest of the Most High God, and he blessed Abram, and said his words. And then the king of Sodom said unto Abram, he was wanting to give him gifts, and treat him for, rescuing their people and overtaking the other countries. But Abram told him, I don't want anything from you, not even a thread from your shoe latchet. He said, just give the men that their due and just call it that. So you think about that. Now, he didn't want nothing from the king. It's like us when, we're having hard times and people try to help us and all that. Sometimes people have bad intentions to help you. It's like with that king trying to give Abram stuff. Abram didn't want him to give him anything because he didn't want him to hold it over his hand like, I made Abram rich. I did this for Abram. I did that. He just basically said, I don't want even a piece of thread from you. So maybe it's like with us, when people try to help us when we're down, sometimes they're doing it for the wrong intentions rather than the right. So maybe sometimes we shouldn't even let anybody do anything for us. But now, God makes a covenant with Abram. He comes to him and gives him, I guess, in a vision or whatever. But he taught him, fear not, your shield and exceeding great reward. And Abram asked, what will you give me? I go childless, And Abram, God taught him, your seed's going to multiply and be a great nation. And now, but the thing is, when God taught him that, Abram believed. It says he believed, and the Lord had counted it to him for his righteousness. It's like that, it's like us, God has a promise for all of us. He has a purpose for all of us. He has a plan for all of us. Basically, promise, purpose, and a plan. Sometimes it don't look good what comes our way, what our future holds. The circumstances, our situations. But He has a purpose for us. We just have to have a strong faith and belief in Him that He'll take care of us and His plan will unfold in our lives. Times look grim, but He's in control of all the times. So He took a heifer, made an offering and stuff and all that, and then God told Abram, He said, know for sure that your seed's going to be a stranger in a land that's not theirs, and they'll serve them, and they'll be afflicted for 400 years. Now you think about this, is Abraham telling them. God telling Abraham this. And they was afflicted for 400 years when they was in Egypt. So that's basically prophecy right there that's already been fulfilled. But you see, it's told countless years before it even happened. And God told him that nation that they serve, He'll judge them, and they'll come out with great substance. And He'll go to His fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. And in the fourth generation, they'll come hither again. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Now that got me off guard, really, because what iniquity do the Amorites have that they have to be judged about? So that's something I've got to look into. But if anybody watches this and sees it, and something about the Amorites and the iniquity of why it's not full, let me know, because I'm curious about that. I'm going to take time to study that more. But so He made a covenant with Abram, told him, his seed, He'll give him the lands from the rivers of Egypt unto the great river, the river of Euphrates. So basically that's Genesis 11 through 15. But this is basically what I get out of all these 5 chapters is God has a plan, and we don't know what His plan is for each of us individually, or what His plan is for us all as a whole. He didn't want the nations or the people at the time to be one accord for some reason. And for me, I believe that is just to populate the earth. Honestly, I do. I believe He had the people separated for His purpose to populate the earth, for the earth to grow, for the nations to be formed, and then, things to come for the nations to go through, so other nations would form. People rebel against the kingdoms and all that, and then start other nations and all that. And I believe that is for basically His purpose of His Son. And because He wanted His people, He knew before then, as the people was one language, that He wanted Israel for His people. And He wanted Christ to come to save the world, to save the sinner. So if people are one accord through their lives, and if this whole world was just one nation and one accord, then what would be the purpose for Christ? There would be no hunger, because people would be working together. There would be no strife, because people would be working together. There'd be no hatred, no murder, no warfare. People basically, everybody, if they was one accord, they wouldn't call to God. They wouldn't want nothing to do with God, because they was doing everything themselves. But with people being divided and having, different nations and all that, and you have wars, you have different religions, you have people in, individuality, and you have, separation and stuff. And I think with that, with people having choices. If people was one accord, they wouldn't have a choice. They'd just be doing everything together. And you got to have some kind of separation, because what kind of world would this be if everybody was the same? What would it be if they was all one accord? It'd be boring. And then I believe that happened with him having to separate them and stuff to not be one accord. We wouldn't have had. I mean, we would have, God has a purpose and His plan's going to work anyway, but we wouldn't have had Israel being in bondage, being brought out, becoming a nation, being persecuted all through the years, and then Christ coming. And, I'm sure if people was in one accord, He'd still, we wouldn't need Christ, but if we was in one accord, we wouldn't have realized we needed Christ, that we was worthless, and we wouldn't amount to nothing without Him. But I do believe that, because it was me personally, just me in general, myself, I'm nothing without Him. I'm weak. I fail Him every day. I feel like I don't know what people do to be strong, as some people are. I don't feel like I'm as strong as I could be, as I should be. But the thing is, too, we all have our own minds. We choose what we want, and a lot of times we put ourselves through the stuff ourselves, rather than the devil taking us over. We just give ourselves to the devil to toy with us and all that, when our own minds and our own willpower, we could just say no to the devil and to the temptations that we do have. But I think that we want to fall into the temptations ourselves, and that's why we do, rather than not wanting to and falling into them. I do believe that. But that is Genesis 11 through 15.